Okay, good morning. Before I get into this workshop's topic, I just want to give you a little warning up front. You're not going to need your phones. You're not going to need your laptops. I'm really going to need your attention and your brains. Okay? The other thing I wanted to throw out there to you is that I will be sharing some stories that can be triggering in this workshop. We're going to go quite intimate, quite deep into a few things, and I just want you to be ready. I just want to give you that early warning that we might be touching on things that are quite difficult to hear. If at any point you do hear something that is too distressing, I know this is what not you usually expect from a tech conference, but if you do hear anything like that, then please by all means just head out the door, take whatever steps you need to process it. Okay? So I'll start with a story like that. Yesterday, there's a young girl, 16 years old. She's walking quietly across a car park in the UK, in South London, in fact. Walking through the rain, which is always present in UK. Walking through the rain, she is utterly focused on her, focused on her goal, focused on what she's going to do. She's made a very difficult decision. She only sees two options in her life. One option is to stay around and try to get through another day. The other option she has is to end her life. And she has decided on option 2. So in this moment of distress, as she climbs the steps of a multi-story car park to stand out in the rain on a ledge at the top, she does something very, very unexpected in that moment. She calls someone. She calls a complete stranger. Why? She's plotted her course, she's planned what's going to happen, and she's called a stranger. Not her family, not her friends, not anyone that knows her at all, a complete stranger. I'll ask you a quick question now, just have a think. Why has she placed that call? What is she looking for from that phone call? Does anyone want to suggest anything that might come to mind? It's a difficult question to start with. She's in an utter moment of crisis, the lowest moment of her life, and she makes a call to a complete stranger. Well, I can tell you what she was looking for. She was looking for someone who will give her space to talk. She was looking for someone to listen to her for probably the first time she's ever felt that. And in truth, when someone has made that very big decision, they're also wanting something that we kind of forget humans need, which is somebody to pay witness to them, to see them in that moment, to just understand them as best someone else can, to feel a connection when every other connection in her life is not serving her. Now, the sad end to this story is that, of course, she does have someone to share with, but she does then take her life. However, the very last thing that she does say is thank you. Thank you for listening to me. So when I share this superpower this morning, this isn't just about being a better collaborator at work. It's not just about being a good leader, a key skill for software and technical leadership. It's a key skill for life. No other skill I've ever learned has helped me as much as this one. Slightly happier story. About 5 years ago, I was a leader of about 20 people in an organization, and I was having a one-to-one. Who here has to conduct one-to-ones? Anyone have to do that? Right, you might understand the dread of having a one-to-one with somebody where you don't know what to say. You feel you have to say something, and you're going into the one-to-one, but there's no common ground. You're not that person, you know you're not that person, and one-to-ones in that sort of framing can be very difficult to approach. And I'd had that experience. I was a relatively green around the gills one-to-one expert, and I was sitting there in this one-to-one and I was dreading it. Because every time I had this one-to-one with this person, not only are they on another time zone, they're in another culture, they've had another upbringing. I know so little about them. And I'm supposed to, as I saw it, guide a one-to-one to make this a productive and useful experience for us both. Okay. I cheated. I had a little tool in my toolbox that I thought I'd try. At the time, I was learning to use it. And this tool was a game changer. Bearing in mind, I had no personal relationship with this one-to-one person I was having one-to-one with. I knew nothing about their background entirely other than the fact they worked in my group. But I thought I'd approach it differently. Rather than me going in with, here's some things we're going to talk about. Do you have anything else you want to talk about? I went in and thought, you know what, I'm not going to do anything except listen to her. I'm going to ask questions that just are ways to find out more about her and where she's at right now. That one-to-one was mind-blowing. At the end of it, we were both in tears. I'd never had such a strong connective experience with somebody I was leading. Afterwards, this person sat me down in another session, another coffee session, and said they had never had a one-to-one like that, where they'd opened up about their challenges in life. I could understand their social context. I could empathize with their position, and better than that, they could detect it. They could feel it too. Suddenly I had a connection, and I'd almost said nothing in that one-to-one, other than opening questions. The sad fact is, most of us don't have one-to-ones like that, but we could. And with these tools I'm hopefully going to show to you today, those are the sort of one-to-ones you can have with your colleagues. You can have them with your bosses. You can have them with almost anybody. You can use these tools out on that conference floor today. And I really hope it helps you connect to other people. I'll explain why that's so important to me personally at the end of the workshop. Now, it is a workshop. I'm going to ask you to have some moments of reflection and work. But I'm not going to be asking you to share anything you're uncomfortable with. Okay? I've just opened up with 2 stories that are very personal to me that have been suitably anonymized so that you can be a little more open with the people in this room. Okay? So what I would like you to do as a first little challenge is I'd like you to take 5 minutes and think about when you were last really listened to. When did you last feel that somebody was just locked in to your words and trying to grapple with the way you see the world? Just take 5 minutes to think about it, and then I'll ask if there's anybody in the room that wants to share who that person was and why you felt that way, and also how did it feel to you when you were being listened to. It's going to take 5 minutes, I think, to do that. If I give you those 5 minutes now, just have a think, and I'll come and interrupt you when I feel like the tension's too much and we're all getting bored. I'll come back. So about 5 minutes. Think about somebody that truly listened to you and how it felt to you. Okay? Right. Maximum 5 minutes. Might be less. Okay. Could be a dad. Could be a distant family member. Could be a friend. Could be someone in the pub. Could be nobody. Could be very hard to find. For everyone online, do the same thing. I know you can't feed it back to me. I want you to grapple with how it felt. Could be a partner. Should be a partner, maybe. Okay. Wasn't quite 5 minutes. But does anyone want to share that moment in your life when you felt listened to, how it felt to you, and how, and maybe even who it was if you're able to share? Does anyone want to do that? You don't have to. If you don't, I'll share one of mine. Now think about all the money your organizations spend on productivity, on tools, on co-pilots, on AI, on everything else that goes towards making you a good contributing team member. What my friend here has just explained is by tapping into people, there's a lot of human intelligence we can unlock first. And so I would encourage you as part of this to remember that. And I mean, how did it make you feel that someone had actually latched onto you that way? Appreciated. Yeah. It's uncanny how good being listened to can make you feel. Now, I'm in the UK, I'm a member of the Samaritans. And I'll talk a little bit about the organization in a bit because it's where I got my training from. If you're not familiar with what we do in the UK, the simple answer is people call us when they're in crisis, burned out, at their wits' end. I've even had phone calls from people that have lost their dog. It can be as simple as, I'm in a difficult moment, I need to share it with someone. We're a listening service. We can't advise, we don't judge. We establish trust, it's entirely confidential. And more often than not, at the end of a call, we get a thank you. And from our perspective, we haven't done anything. Because we can't. We can't intervene. We don't know the person on the call. What we do know is that we're giving them space to work it out for themselves. And that in itself leads to that appreciation that my friend here has talked about. Now, wouldn't it be a wonderful gift for you to be able to give to the people you work with that same experience? It's so trivially easy to manufacture, especially with the tools I'm going to share with you here. And it can make an astounding difference to the way that you experience working in tech. Because the true fact of it is that you could be the best coder in the room, but if you don't connect with your team members and connect with your friends at work, hopefully, then you're missing a trick. High performance, generative, productive high performance comes from people that know one another a bit better than that. So, I'm going to talk about it now in terms of what the skill is. The skill that I'm going to encourage you to pick up is active listening. It's very different than just listening. Just listening is usually distracted. We're always planning to respond. You know, we go into a meeting and it's like, right, what am I going to contribute to this? How am I going to look like an expert here and now? Active listeners don't do that. They will go into a room to be quiet, to listen to others. It takes a big leap of faith to do that. Unfortunately, most, I'm going to say Western style meetings are dominated by what you are saying rather than what you are listening to. I've had a lot of comments to me, even in recent times at different jobs I've had, where they've said, "You're very quiet in that meeting, Russ." Yes, I am. But I've listened to everything that's said, and I've seen a lot more than anyone else in that room. I've been able to take on board and have a collection of questions that are much deeper than I would have had if I was just waiting to say my bit. But it takes practice, and it takes courage to do it. So I'm going to try and convince you it's worth it. Okay, so this is active listening. We've already done the quick thought experiment where I asked you, want you to think about how it felt to be listened to. I can share quickly one of my experiences in this. I was one of the people that called the Samaritans. I was considering taking my life. This was 3 years ago, and I just received a diagnosis that I had cancer. I was terrified. I was also confused. I didn't even know what it meant to have cancer. I'd never been ill in my life. I'd ridden motorcycles. I'd expected to be injured, but I'd never been injured. I'd been very lucky. I called this line because I was in an absolute terrible state. I was starting to make plans. I spoke to someone for just 50 minutes. My entire life turned around. They said almost nothing. When I think back now, they didn't say much at all. But they did listen, and they did make some interesting questions into it. And on the follow-on calls I had with them, each time they helped me think ahead. They pushed me ahead. What's happening tomorrow? What's happening next week? What are you looking forward to? And it helped me go further. So that's probably one of the few times in my life that I understood what listening looks like. The tragedy is I realized that a lot of people very close to me don't listen. I felt really disconnected from people all of a sudden because I thought, I want more of this. Where do I get this in my normal day to day? Well, that's why I'm teaching you it today. Because I want you to have it in your normal day to day, and then maybe I'll have some of it with you too. Okay. So several misunderstandings about what active listening is. When you're engaging with someone else to listen to them, some of the thoughts they'll have is, why would anyone care about what I'm going to say? It's a one-to-one, for example. We'll go back to the one-to-one. I'm not talking about my plans. I'm not talking about my growth opportunities. I'm being asked how I'm feeling today. That doesn't feel very productive. But it's enormously productive. And so trying to dispel some of these things, or being aware of them as something that's the baggage in someone's mind when you're beginning to listen to them, is important. I've had this come up many, many times with leaders. I don't have time to listen. I'll draw you back to my friend here's story. If your job is to lead people, your job is to help them be as creative as possible. We call it productive. I'm not a big fan of that term. I don't work on a factory production line. People are creative. To help them be creative, you have to listen to them. I'll be judged for what I did. If someone's trying to share something with you, you have to establish not just rapport with somebody, but also confidentiality. If someone is going to feel able to share with you so that you can listen actively, you have to establish a level of confidentiality and trust from the get-go. One of my jobs, one of my volunteer things in the Samaritans, is I go into prisons in the UK. I go into prisons so that I can listen to prisoners who are also listeners to other people in prisons. Why? Because it reduces the number of suicides and self-harm in prison. And it does that by giving someone a space to talk. No one should feel judged. I go into prisons. The easiest starting point is I'm going to judge you. They've been judged all their lives. They've been judged for sometimes very good reasons. However, in that moment, they're going to experience something they haven't experienced before, no one judging them. It's mind-blowing when people realize that they aren't being judged. My feelings are complicated. They won't get it. I don't know if I understand it. That's okay. Amount of times I've asked someone, how are you feeling today? And they go, I don't know. Oh, fair enough. Why would you? Putting it into words can be pretty hard. Why don't we start with what's happening right now? Or what made you want to talk to me? What's going on with you? We'll start with actions and then we'll get to feelings. Because it's feelings where you want to go. It's very hard for people in software to think that's a good idea. We really like hard, tangible science, but feelings are where you go with active listening. Another one here that I want to just talk about, because I get this a lot. I just need to man up. Just need to get on with it. The amount of absolute rubbish that is on social media that passes for psychological or psychiatric help and motivation is astounding. It's all full of, well, you just direct your thoughts this way and you'll be fine. Absolute rubbish. You only have to go through cancer to realize it. None of that is helpful. It's okay to be feeling difficult feelings. It's okay, because you will, regardless of gender, whether you want to man up or whatever, or be boss lady or whatever you think that needs to be there, let that go. When someone is truly offering you an opportunity to be listened to, and you trust them, there's rapport, you can lay it all on the line. You can tell them the truth. I'll give an example of where it doesn't happen. I was in a very dark place after I got cancer. I eventually got better. I'm very glad to be able to say I am now cancer-free. In that period of time, a very close person to me came to me and saw I was in tears. And she asked, "What's going on with you? You all right?" And I said, No, I'm not. And she said, "Oh," and then she left. Because, do you know why she left? Because she didn't know what to do. Because she thought she had to do something. All she needed to do was sit down and let me talk about everything that's going on in my head. I needed that in that moment. And I didn't get it. The smallest of gifts, I didn't get it. Okay, so that's some of the misunderstandings. Some of the benefits, if we can get there. Being heard and understood is an obvious benefit. You can discover your strengths. One of the things you'll realize is what you can do with your situation. The beauty of active listening is that the listener doesn't have the answer, doesn't need to have the answer. You will find it. As I said, I do these calls in the Samaritans. I do them every week. And as I do them, I can't offer any advice. I can barely signpost people to other places. But almost without fail, on a shift, I'll get at least one call where at the end of the call, they'll say, "Thank you. Thank you for all your advice. I've given none. I can't. It's against the policies." But they've found the answers themselves because you've given them the space to think it through. And probably most importantly, it's the reception of empathy and your ability to offer compassion. These are blurry words that, again, developers like myself, I've been a developer for 30 odd years now, we don't like these things. These things sound a little bit self-helpy and that sort of thing. Receiving empathy is just realizing that someone else gets your perspective. Or at least they're trying to get it. And you've been given the opportunity to share what it looks like in your world. I'll talk more about this in a minute, but empathy is badly understood. But enormously useful when you're trying to help somebody like my good friend. Okay. And so very quickly, this is where I'm coming from on this. This is the organization I've been trained by. We are just volunteers. We don't get paid. I go into prisons and I'm not paid for it. I do that every month. I go in and talk to prisoners in Lewis Prison. It's a Category B prison in the UK. It's full of everything from people who have stolen something from a shop through to people who are serial killers. We all give our time freely when we're doing this, and there's a reason we do it. So besides all of that, which is all the good stuff that we do, why do I do it? Because there's nothing better than connecting with people in this world. Even strangers, whether it be my colleagues or anybody else, connecting with people is why I'm here. And it's absolutely a set of skills that I can apply to every aspect of my life. Okay, so let's get into what they are. So what is good listening as opposed to what we all usually do? Me included. Okay, I'm really uncomfortable being the person talking. I'm much preferable to listen, but most people don't listen to understand. They listen to respond. I'm listening to you because I'm waiting to say my piece, my next thing to you. One of the things I had to learn early doors is I was going to take phone calls from strangers. My very first instinct of this, the same instinct that hurt me when it came to having that one-to-one with somebody, is what am I going to say on the phone to them? Nothing. Give them space. The first piece. And then lead with something that's really important. Lead with curiosity. To help you understand this, I want you to start to grapple with a particular modality of psychology. That modality is the person-centered approach in counseling. Person-centered starts from an interesting perspective. So if you're used to the usual psychiatrist couch view that gets on TV a lot, then what you see there is the psychiatrist is the expert. And you are the subject. You are what we're going to talk about today. And you get this impression that the expert's sitting there with this golden knowledge somewhere that's going to drop on you at any moment to help you navigate through the world. The person-centered approach doesn't do that. It starts from a different principled starting point. You know nothing. You are not the expert. As the listener to whoever you're listening to, your first starting point to do active listening is to realize you know nothing about them. If you have to say it to yourself in your head, do it. I do. I know nothing. Even if what they're saying feels familiar, you know nothing. Dig into it. Because then what you do is you don't have to have a bunch of questions in your mind, because they'll come out of what they say. Because you'll want to know more about what they're saying. You'll ask open questions about their world without assuming you understand it. Terribly hard when you're mentoring people that are on a similar career to you. Because it feels like what they're facing is what you faced. So here's my recipe for overcoming that. If you feel yourself doing that, stop. Ask them more about what they're experiencing in that moment. What is their struggle? How does the world look to them? Everybody I listen to on the phones, every time I have a conversation at work, I start from a position of utter ignorance. I don't know what's going on in their world. I don't know how the world looks to them. Two people can observe exactly the same situation and have very different takeaways from it, as any police inspector will tell you. And it's the same, it's something you need to remind yourself whenever you're engaging in active listening. You need to be curious because you know nothing. And so it's all about helping that person share with you what they're seeing in the world before you leap in with any ideas. Unconditional positive regard is table stakes as well. Everyone I speak to, I start from a position of, you're my friend. People have commented this on me before. I often say to people, if I don't know their name, hi friend, how you doing? I just said, hi my friend. Why? Because you are. I start from there, okay? Yes, if you turn out to pull a gun on me, maybe no longer friends. But I'm going to start from a position of positive regard because you deserve it, whoever you are. Bearing in mind, I go to prisons with that same attitude as well. Congruence is a complicated word for a situation you want to engender. You want to become a situation where everyone can bring their full self to. So your congruence is saying, I'm with you on this journey. I'm with you in this moment. I'm not thinking about other things. I'm not trying to plan other things. I'm here for you right now. An empathic understanding. Digging in until you understand what they see in the world. Understanding what their world looks like. Okay, so yeah, it comes from this principle of you are not the expert, they are. Now, I don't know if you've ever had a therapist like that. I hope you have. I've had mentors like it. And I would say to you, anyone here who is thinking of becoming a mentor, start from that principle. You are not the expert. You're just the mentor. Your job is to help them open up and figure it out for themselves as much as it is to offer any experiences from your world. Okay, so we're going to have to double down now on that woolly word, empathy. Does anyone want to offer me a suggestion for what the difference between sympathy and empathy is? Any ideas what sympathy feels like? Yes. I like this picture because sympathy and empathy would look very different in this picture. Sympathy is being up the top and going, oh, must be hard down there. You know, thoughts and prayers. No, I'm really feeling sorry for you. I mean, I'm not doing anything. And I don't really understand what your world looks like, but it sounds nasty, so damn hard. Empathy, the way we explain it when I do my volunteering, is you're climbing down the hole and sitting with them. You're trying to understand how that situation looks to them. When I've been on those calls with people who are in a very dark place, I spend most of my time trying to see the world from their perspective. Because when you do, it does make sense. You sit there and go, I get why you're feeling this way. I feel like you're feeling. At least I have a glimpse of it. It can't be perfect. And this is something I did in my one-to-one. I was having a one-to-one with somebody I didn't know anything about, and I kept asking questions to figure out, what does it look like to you? Why is it a challenge? This person I was having a one-to-one with was going through a transition in their life. They were becoming a woman from being a man. Not an experience I was familiar with, but I learned so much by just being open to it and trying to understand, what does that feel like to be doing that? And then trying to go to work and do that too. That was an incredibly interesting perspective, and I learned an enormous amount. This is one of the bonuses of practicing empathy, is you learn so much about how the world looks to other people. You start to feel it with them. So yeah, sympathy is more of a, I feel sorry for you. Empathy is, I get it. I see it. I think I can see a glimpse of what you're seeing now. And we actually want to go beyond empathy if we can. In active listening, the active quota of it can be becoming compassionate. That's when we understand the position enough to be able to explore what they might do, what might change that situation. Compassionate action is about helping someone with their world, as you've been given a window on it. Okay, so this is where the compassion comes in. You're helping someone take action. You're not judgmental about what they're going to do. You try not to advise, because advice without context is usually damaging. So you're asking them, what would they do? That's what I do on my calls. On my one-to-ones, I ask first and foremost, what do you have in your plans? What do you think's a good idea here? Is there anything that you think you want to do that could improve your situation? And I don't judge it. If they say it's, I want to do this, and I've seen people do that before, you don't always sit there and go, that's a terrible idea. What you might do is go, okay, be prepared for the downsides, but actually that sounds like a reasonable course. Lots of people have tried that. Now you're preparing them for potentially a disappointing action, but you're not preventing them from it. Okay. And you've got to be aware, there was one last sentence on there I wanted to help you understand. Biases. Does anyone want to guess how many biases there are in the world? You must have heard of hindsight bias, right? When we look back and realize that we were stupid, could have done things better, all that critic in our heads telling us off for being an idiot. That's because we have hindsight bias, because everything looks perfect in hindsight. Why didn't I know? Because if you actually went back there and felt how you felt and knew what you knew, you don't have that perfect vision of the future. So hindsight bias, as John Osborne calls it, is a hell of a drug, and we all suffer from it. But how many other biases are out there? Well, it turns out there's actually only one. And it all comes from the fact that the brain is a prediction engine. There's a wonderful paper on this. It's in the additional notes to this workshop. And almost every bias that we've declared in these huge frameworks of biases can be distilled to one, which is the brain is trying to predict. When you are active listening, you have to fight that instinct in your brain. Don't predict what they're going to say. Ever. It's so patronizing, as my mum knows. My mum is 2 or 3 sentences ahead of me at all times, to the point where sometimes she'll say something to me and I have no idea how she got there. And sometimes it works, don't get me wrong, sometimes it's a good thing. Most often though, I'm like, no, come back. This is what I'm trying to say, and maybe I want to go in this direction with it. You might have had that experience when you've tried to mentor people, where you're offering them what you think is a really good course of action, and their reaction is, no, No, I don't want any of that. No, you're not understanding it. You're not getting it. It's because you're leaping ahead of them. Same thing happens when someone is talking to you and you think you've got it grokked and you start to respond and interrupt. Never interrupt. And this is a hard one because most work meetings are interrupt-driven situations. The amount of times I've watched someone talk over somebody else in meetings and they're not even really listening to what is being said. You're missing all the opportunity of that meeting and you're probably making a few enemies in the process. One of the things that struck me with so much force when I first started training to do active listening was how people would leave gaps after sentences. Someone would say something and I would watch someone else listening and they'd leave a gap, which felt very nerve-wracking. And then they would respond because they were waiting for two things. They're waiting to see if there's any more coming, and they're also waiting to see if whatever they think actually is worth opening up more questions and going in new directions. So they're genuinely pondering what someone has just said. I won't ask you to give me any examples, but I would like you to either during or after this workshop to think about times when you've done that, when someone has been saying something to you and you've talked over them. You've ended their sentence for them perhaps, and you've leaped on to the next thing. Oh yeah, I get it, it's this. And then think about if you hadn't done that, how you could have given them a bit more space. We're embarrassingly in love with the idea that we have to move fast. We don't. With active listening, slow it all down. Leave pauses. I will talk a little bit more about how you can practice that in a bit. Okay. So that's what good listening looks like. And now I want to unpack what good listening can do in the head of the person that you're listening to. Now, when we're doing listening, active listening at work, maybe we're doing a one-to-one, maybe we're doing a end-of-year review. That's good timely stuff, right? Maybe we're doing a difficult conversation. Maybe we're about to offer someone a performance improvement plan. Maybe we're just having a coffee. In all those moments, you can choose to actively listen. And one of the reasons you might choose to do it is the conditions within the person's brain. I've lost count of the number of times I've sat with someone at work who has had similar challenges to my friend here, where they are feeling evidence of burnout is in what they're saying. One of the quickest ways of understanding that position is to actively listen in that moment, which means I stop talking and I give them lots and lots of space and I'm really listening to what they say. What's happening in their head, though, is something we call the emotional flywheel. Again, emotions don't usually come up at conferences of a tech sort, but here we go. So in your head, what happens is you've got thoughts, and they create feelings, and feelings create behaviors, and behaviors reinforce thoughts, and this spins up. The metaphor we use, let's have a look, is the one of a dryer, okay? When someone comes to you to talk, or you go to them to talk, whatever the scenario is, be sensitive to what I call the mental tumble dryer. You know, think of it like this as a metaphor. There's a tumble dryer that's spun up and all the clothes are rattling around, and all those clothes are their emotions, their thoughts, their feelings. Your job as an active listener is not to pick up any of those clothes. It's not to go and turn the machine off. It's to do none of that. Your job is to watch them do it. So what you do is you give them space to turn off the machine, to start taking the clothes out, to fold them up, put them in a nice neat pile. You're not changing the actual clothes that are there. You can't change the conditions of their life. They can, but they can only do it once you've given them the space to place everything out and begin to sort through it. So that's your job. When you're doing active listening, your job is to provide the space for them to sort through their own feelings, to share them and sort through them themselves. It's absolutely remarkable that when you do this, the impact it has. I go back to that one-to-one where an individual was literally spinning out of control, and all I did was give her time to lay it all out. And at the end of it, she felt I'd solved it all. I'd done nothing. I just listened. Okay, so that's one of the things that happens when you listen. Let's get into some practical stuff now. And what I'm going to do with each of these, I'm going to ask you to spend a few minutes just thinking about how you might do it yourself and practice it yourself. The first one is an easy one. And actually, before I dive into too much, I want to talk about the fact that this is non-exhaustive. There is a lot of other practices out there that can help you with listening. But the first one is the power of the pause. Really, really hard to do. Especially if you've got ideas about what you want to ask them next. Your job, when someone says something to you, is to not say anything. See if you can do it for a count of 1 or 2 in your head. And then say something. And if they continue talking, you reset the clock and you listen to what they're saying, and then you give yourself a count of 1 or 2 at the end before you say anything. Perhaps you reflect in those 1 or 2, that count of 1 to 2, what you might say and what questions you might ask. So I'll give you a few minutes now just to think about how you might apply the power of the pause to your conversations. Just have a think about who you might try it out with. Is there anyone at work that you want to connect with a little better? Is there anyone here that you'd like to connect with a little better? Have a little think, and then just make a note, mental note of, I'm going to try and practice the power of the pause. So I'll give you a couple of minutes just to think about it, and then I'll come back with the next one. Okay? Okay. Oh, I've got a soundtrack. It's not me. Okay. So the power of the pause. I love the fact I have a soundtrack now that's like smooth jazz. Okay, the power of the pause is just one tool. It sounds so trivial. I practiced this with one of my best friends, someone I'd known for 20 years. And because I just tried this in one evening at the pub, I found out so much about him. I found out that he was severely depressed. I never knew. I found out that he had plans to take his life. I never knew. I now have such a stronger connection to my friend just by doing this. So it's all of these sound small, all of these sound almost trivial, but they are utter keys to unlock connection with people. Okay, so the next one. Listening to understand, not to respond. It's related to the power of the pause, but I want you to just think for a couple of minutes about a moment where you have listened to respond. Usually it doesn't take long to look back and find one. Where you've been listening to someone, you've gone, yeah, I know what I'm going to say. I know what I'm going to say. I'm going to say it now. And you've completely missed what they're saying because you're thinking about what you're going to say. And in fact, the way that we run meetings is very much on this basis. Okay, you're only as smart as what you say. What rubbish that is. So have a think. 1 minute I'll give you for this one, but just have a think about when you've listened to respond. And then maybe play it out in your head. Maybe if you hadn't responded, maybe if you'd let someone say more. By the way, this is a great way of finding out if people are talking vacuously. Because they keep going, they've got nothing more to add to it. I get this a lot with salespeople. I give them time to space and talk, and they get lost because I'm not interrupting them with answers. But yeah, just take 1 minute to think about a case where you've listened to respond, where you possibly could have listened to understand, and it might have unlocked more insights. Sing the smooth jazz now. Okay. The next beastie that I want you to consider for your listening toolbox is asking good questions. So this is a tool that I use. Usually new Samaritans who are getting used to taking phone calls or they're in their mentoring. And it's just a reminder of what we could say. So when you're actively listening, and this is what I used, by the way, for this one-to-one. I grabbed this, we call it the listening wheel, and I had this in the corner of my vision. I was on a Zoom call with this person over in the States, and I just used this, and I thought, okay, what sort of question could I ask now? What should I say now? Maybe I should just reflect back what they've just said. They've just told me that they're finding life really difficult. You're finding life really difficult. Sounds so hokey, but it works. They'll go, yeah, actually, yeah, you get me. And off they go. Insights delivered. Brilliant. Summarizing. After they've spoken for a while about something, show them you've been listening. Rattle it back. The amount of times I've had somebody explain a very complicated mental health view of the world, and I've gone back and said, so you see this, this, and this, and this. And they go, yeah. I was like, wow, that's difficult. They're like, yeah. Had so much. Reacting is a silly one. It's like, yep. Tells them you're listening. There's a danger with active listening when you first start practicing it, is you go super silent. The problem with that is they don't know you're listening. So you have to inject some sort of either body language or notes to say, yes, I am here. I'm paying attention. I mean, there are obvious ways of not doing this as well. Like, I'm listening to you, but I'm looking at my phone. Or I'm really looking at the notifications, all my emails coming up. Really engage and listen. There's nothing else in the world but you and that other person. There's a lovely quote from Maya Angelou, a poet, about how she lived her life, why she was good at poetry. It's because she lives absolutely in every moment. She used the phrase of, everything I am is in this room right now. I'm not thinking about lunch. I'm not thinking about where I park my car. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to do later on today. I'm not thinking about how good the party's going to be this evening. I'm here with you right now, and that's everything. If you can do that, if you can establish that congruence, just watch the connections grow. True connections, not LinkedIn connections, true connections. Short words of encouragement is very similar to reacting. It's like, oh yeah, can you tell me more on that? Oh, that's interesting. And then clarifying is a useful one to go, do you mean this? Is that does that sound right to you? You know, you said you see the world this way. Is that, am I getting it? Am I understanding that? In none of this, and then of course I forgot the best one, open questions. Don't just go, oh, you said this, right? Yes. You said this. What led you to feel that way? Do you have any idea when that started? What was it like yesterday for you? What is it? All those sorts of things. When did you last feel, valuable at work? I asked an open question when I came in here. When was the first time you felt you were properly listened to? Can you remember that moment? And how did it feel? It's an open question. I don't know what your answer is going to be, but it's definitely not going to be yes or no. This is a beautiful tool to get you started. You won't need this once you start practicing active listening. It will become very natural to ask these sorts of questions and make these sorts of noises. Okay. Shush. Shush is just another acronym. Show you care. When someone calls me, I do not know them at all. The very first thing I try to say to them is thank you for calling. I don't care if you're calling just to tell me you've lost your dog, or you can't, today just looks difficult for you. Or even sometimes I'm lost, can I find the directions to the bridge, please? So one of the downsides of having a poster that says, got questions? Call us. We get some really interesting responses. I don't care. Thank you for calling. This is you. This is me and you right now. Welcome. I care about you. That's the baseline. Have patience. Don't rush people on. If you've decided to have a 30-minute one-to-one, make sure there's nothing afterwards. Let it go on. That's a good thing. It's possibly the most valuable moments of your day. So let it have the space to breathe. Use obviously the open questions, we've spoken about that, and saying it back, reflecting it back to them. That builds rapport, it builds empathy, it builds understanding. Have courage. Okay. It takes a lot of courage to have patience and show you care. The amount of times I've been on a call where I've gone, thank you for having the courage to call us. People that call the Samaritans don't feel brave. They feel often in crisis and the narrative in their heads can be extremely tough on them. It's unkind to them. You can break that by being someone who shows they care, by going, you're really brave to have called us today. I'm so glad you've done it. You can do the same with your co-workers. Thank you for coming and have a chat with me. I'm so glad you've shared this. Giving them comfort that they should have done this. They should have opened up and shared with you. Okay, so that's shush. And the last one for today is the 4 C's. Remember to be curious. When someone wants to open up to you, step back and realize you're the dumbest person in the room. They're the expert. Let them talk about how they see it all. Be compassionate, even when you don't share much common ground. I don't know what it's like to transition. I don't know what it's like to live in Portland, Oregon. I don't know what it's like to have a family that's distributed across the United States. So I'm super curious, and I'm super compassionate to all the elements of difficulty that I see that they're taking the bravery to explain to me. And finally, and most importantly, be confidential about it. Maybe even explicitly confidential. I often do this when I'm having a one-to-one, or whether I'm having just a conversation at work with a coworker. I'll say, this is just between us. Not because I'm saying anything that's like against the company or against our boss. I'm just saying, in this moment, it's just us here. You can say anything. I'm not going to judge. It's confidential. Okay? If there are elements that you want to share afterwards, get permission. You have to explicitly get a permission to share anything afterwards. If you have this sort of deep, active listening session, you always need permission to share it with anybody else. I asked for permission to share the story about my one-to-one. Okay. If you don't ask permission and you're not confidential, your listening will be impoverished for it. Okay. Coming to an end now, I think. This is only the beginning. I'm hoping to put together a collection of soft skills that can help teams and people collaborate and genuinely connect better with each other. My perspective is software engineering is a collaborative, creative endeavor. The better we connect to one another, the more chance we have of doing great things. And so active listening is at the heart of it, but it's not the only tool. There is a whole collection of stuff that's gradually appearing on GitHub. That link should take you to a GitHub repo. If you want anything in particular from that repo, if there's things that you want me to explore in more detail, just raise a ticket. It's the beauty of GitHub. Create a ticket and say, Russ, I really want X. I want to know more about the power of the pause. I want to know more about how I can practice access. Maybe I want to know more about what the Samaritans do. I don't mind. The question doesn't matter. I'm all ears. I want to help you be a better collaborative member of your teams, because I reckon I'll get better software out of it. Okay. Just before I end, I want you to remember something. Whenever you're taking on a new practice, it can be quite easy to be very critical of yourself when you're doing it. The amount of times I walk away from an opportunity to listen to somebody and go, I didn't do it. I didn't listen to them. I was just there responding. And what I do is I go, okay, note that, move on, keep practicing. Changing how you behave and think is one of the hardest things our brain has to do. And this takes practice. But if you put the investment in and you're kind to yourself whilst you're doing it, please be kind to yourself. It's actually I can give you a little tip, right? It's terrifying to take phone calls from strangers, because there's a part of you that goes, why am I good enough to handle this? Their life is in crisis. They're thinking of potentially ending their life. It could be on me whether they take their life or not. The first thing to remember is it's not on you. And the other thing I have a little mantra before I take any phone call. I just go through my head and I say, I am the best person for them to talk to right now. Whoever they are, whatever they're doing, whatever they're seeing, I'm the best. I'm here for them. They've got me for as long as they want me. It's It's another thing you could do with your friends and your partners and your colleagues, is in that moment go, I am going to give them something amazing. I'm going to give them the gift of me listening. And I'm the best person for them to talk to because of that. Suspend your need to advise. You don't. If you're actively listening to them, the answers will come to them. Okay. Sounds like my theme tune. So I'm going to close it out there and wish you good luck with doing these things in your daily work. Please start practicing around the conference. Go out there, speak to some strangers. Come speak to me. I'll listen to you. It's not a problem. And use this tool for better human connection, because you'll be a better software engineering collaborative team member for it. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Appreciate it.